I've got the abbreviated
Good evening.
20 page.
It is 5:30 PM on Tuesday, June 20th, 2023, and this regular meeting of the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I am Vice Chairman Mose Dunkel presiding. Also present are Commissioners Grant Simmons, Slate Camp, Amelia Boyd, Ben McGran, and Wayne Benner. Chairman John Hastings is absent. We'll now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone will please stand. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to make a quick announcement that there are listening devices available to those in attendance here in council chambers. Are there, excuse me, are there any other general announcements from the commissioners or from city staff?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to remind the commission that we are not having the meeting on July 4th. We have a special meeting on July 11th. And we have only one topic on that, and that will be the public hearing on a rezoning request by the county.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay. First on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from May 31st, 2023 joint workshop with City Council.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And the minutes are approved. I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the June 6th, 2023 regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes and the minutes are approved. Next on the agenda is review of the draft comprehensive plan changes based on discussion at the joint city council and planning and zoning commission work session and possible scheduling of a public meeting. I will now yield the floor to city planner Amy Tweeten for an introduction of this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, the commission did discuss this somewhat at your meeting on the 6th. But what I put together are all the changes that were made that came out of that joint meeting, as well as discussion you had on the 6th. So again, throughout the document, if there were typographical errors, wording changes, those were changed. And then it had been Schweitzer Mountain Resort that was changed throughout to simply Schweitzer. We added in the table on page 7 a link to the Little Sand Creek Watershed Management Plan. There was wording about 10,000 visitors to the Sandpoint area. That was changed to tens of thousands. There was discussion of the Neighbor Works program, and it wasn't clear that it was a program that we had. So I put it in the past tense and then added that a similar program could potentially come out of the urban forest master plan implementation. We changed at the direction of the commission, the future land use category from industrial heavy commercial to industrial commercial. That's also changed on the future land use map. We corrected the descriptions of the current ACI land use categories that were just duplicated from the current plan. And we changed that boundary title from tentative ACI boundary to proposed boundary, although it isn't the exact line. It was just felt that was a better word. We added the objective of maximize use of city-owned land for broader community purposes. We updated goal number 1 in the housing and neighborhoods chapter to add quality for a descriptor of housing. And objective B to read encourage housing above retail in mixed use and commercial centers for year-round and short-term housing options and to enhance community vitality.
Amy, I have a question.
Yep.
If I can, on the urban forest, the change, because on page 30, it says neighbor woods. Is it neighbor woods or neighbor works?
Oh, I think it's neighbor woods.
Neighbor woods, okay.
Yeah. It's incorrect here, but it is the.
But
neighbor
it's-
woods
okay.
program. Yep,
Thank you.
good catch. Let's see, we added community events to the goal 6 objective E that was discussion of partnering with the spot and serving community events. We removed those objectives F, G, and H. Those were actually the opening paragraphs of chapter 7, but somehow they got put as objectives in the previous chapter. And then there was a discussion of the need to talk about vehicle charging stations. We added, because we talk about electric bikes and other future technologies and their associated infrastructure. Under the intent, we added language to emphasize the importance of outdoor recreation for health, well-being, and as an economic driver, and changed the reference to the Baldy property as currently being used as a disc golf course. Map 8 on page 28 had outdated trails. It was it's a map that identifies parks, open space, and it had a trail layer, but it showed some of the trails that had been in University Place that don't exist. And there were additional trails that weren't there. So instead of trying to correct that and add all trails, which will be a continuing process, we just referenced numerous trail systems. And there's a list of those on page 77. Updated goal 1 objective F to increase public access to the community shorelines, including existing rights of way. That was, I don't know that the commission felt that that there was a discussion of including road ends. Rights of way is a bit broader. And I feel like if we don't add it now, it'll come up at the public hearing at city council.
Amy,
So
what was this in
I just
reference,
thought-
what was this in reference to?
there was a discussion or recommendation from Councilor Rule to add access to community shorelines at road ends. So if you think of 3rd Street Pier, that's
gotcha.
a road end, and there aren't many of those that exist. But it was just
To the extent possible.
one way to improve access. And then corrected it to the Penderay Economic Partnership. So hopefully with those changes, we've incorporated the discussion from that joint session and as well as what you discussed on the 6th. Other than that, if there's other questions or suggested changes, we'd love to hear them. It's been a long process.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I think it's captured everything we've talked about so far, so nice job.
It's a great document.
Mr. Chair, I'm good. I think I'm ready to move to the next step.
Very good. Commissioners have further questions to the staff at this time? If no additional questions, are commissioners ready to schedule a public hearing on the draft comprehensive plan?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How do we do that?
While you probably don't have to do it via motion, it would help us if the commission is ready to schedule public hearing. The soonest we could make a public hearing and notice sufficient time would be July 18th. So if the commission would like to make a motion to or direct staff to schedule a public hearing for July 18th.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we instructs staff to schedule a public hearing on the proposed comprehensive plan for July 18th, 2023.
Second.
Discussion. My only concern is that it does give us 3 meetings in a row for July. Is that right?
And it is.
Right, you have the 11th, well, you have the 11th and the 18th. You don't have a
Oh.
meeting on the 4th.
Okay, that's right. So,
You
okay.
just, but you do have back-to-back
Yeah.
Okay.
meetings.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that. And we don't need a motion for that?
No,
Okay. All right. Then we'll move on. Next on the agenda is discussion and direction on possible code changes to accessory structures. I will now yield the floor once again to City Planner Amy Tweeten for an introduction to this agenda item.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those of you who have been on the commission longer remember our initial discussion of this back in May of last year. And the issues at that time were really trying to clean up some inconsistencies in the code. Then the discussion came forward of allowing 2 bedrooms in the 900 square feet. But staff didn't feel like just making that change what would result in the best code without making sure we were cleaning up. And particularly because we are going through the comprehensive plan, we're nearing the end, making sure that all of the engagement that happened as part of that process was incorporated into these changes. So we have provided some proposed draft language, and I just want to be clear that if any of you read the minutes from that I included the last 2 times accessory dwellings went to city council, we don't expect this to go 1-2 meetings. We anticipate this to be a discussion for a few meetings, and we want to make sure we get it right, because if you make one change and you don't clean it up somewhere else, we're just going to be right back where we are. So what I gave you was a very, I didn't give you strike throughs and all of that. I can certainly do that. I gave you just a clean proposed language. And what I'm going to do is kind of walk through what those proposed changes are, what they're trying to accomplish. And then a little bit, again, about what the feedback on ADUs has been through the planning process. So the proposed language creates some new needed definitions and updates some existing definitions. It places regulations on accessory structures in one code section, which is 195, and then an additional regulations for accessory dwelling units as a type of accessory structure in 918. Those 2 already exist, but there's other places that accessory structures appear in the code, and those are the things we're trying to clean up. It creates consistent setbacks for all detached accessory structures and clarifies allowable eve encroachments. Now ADUs will be clearly consistent with how we do setbacks for principal structures. It clarifies the intent of the current language requiring detached accessory structures to be behind the primary dwelling. That was a question that came up. May of last year was it talks about them being behind, but it doesn't define what behind means. The proposed language requires that a change of use of an existing accessory structure that is not compliant with current requirements be brought into compliance. So this is a big one, but this is saying if you have a garage or a shed and it's just an accessory building and you want to turn it to a dwelling unit, you will need to have it meet the setback requirements,
What are the setbacks for like a,
5 feet
oh, okay,
from the rear and the side.
gotcha, okay.
But we do have garages that are sitting on lot lines and,
Yep.
so that's something that's been challenging, having multiple
Okay.
setbacks for whether it was existing or not existing, or whether it was called a garage or not. Currently, the code only allows for site-built accessory dwelling units. The proposed language would allow for prefab or modular ADUs if constructed in a HUD-approved facility within the past 12 months. Again, one of the biggest goals of ADUs is affordability, and we know often prefab structures are a more affordable way to build. At the same time, we don't want old trailer homes being brought in and put in as accessory dwelling units. So that's why we have within the past 12 months.
Amy, quick question on that. So we're still asking them to be in aesthetic appeal to the primary structure, right?
Well, yep, well, at what level, we'll get into that detail,
Okay.
but yeah, it would still need to meet that standard.
Mhm.
Whatever standard we come up with.
Amy, I have a question.
Yeah.
If I may, about the change of use. So if I read this correctly, if I have an accessory structure, I want to convert it into a dwelling unit, but it doesn't meet current setback.
Right.
So how I would have to take that wall down and comply with, okay.
Yeah.
Because I remember the discussion that we had in May and I think I was under the impression it was if we tore down an existing, then to rebuild had to be consistent with the current setback, the zones, but this is.
Definitely that would be what we're proposing, again, because the reality is if a garage is sitting on a lot line, your one wall that's not at least 5 feet from the lot
Yeah.
line is gonna have to be a fire rated wall. But we felt that if you're going to change the use of a structure, because it's different having a storage building than having a dwelling unit.
Right.
That it should meet the requirements. But we know that's one of the larger changes that the commission will probably want to discuss.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So on your comment about an old trailer being moved in, does that exist right now? Like if I saw an old trailer, a camp trailer in somebody's yard, positioned in somebody's yard, are they using this, are they using existing code to put that trailer there?
An RV could not be,
Okay,
but if you had a mobile home and you could put it on a foundation, we do actually have that situation.
okay, thank you.
And it did not make the neighborhood happy. So again, through the engagement, on the survey, support was 42.9%, not a big number of respondents. There was support for incentivizing accessory dwelling units, particularly to provide for long-term housing. And then support changes to accessory dwelling units. But the caveats being need for architectural control. Some people felt we should increase bedroom restrictions, or increase in a number of bedrooms. Others thought we should not even talk about bedrooms, just let people have as many as they want. Some felt we should require parking that's accessible year round. Others felt we shouldn't require parking at all, again, to address affordability. Size limit based on lot size versus the arbitrary 900 square feet. And that we should not require sidewalk construction when an ADU is built, triggering the sidewalk construction requirement. Those are some of the both sides feedback that we've received. As you know, when we went through the conditional use process, you have a current comprehensive plan in place, and that is law of the land. There are other goals and policies in the plan, but probably the biggest one in the current plan is to protect and enhance the charm and comfort of Sandpoint's existing neighborhoods. And the policy that goes with that is to encourage small accessory dwelling units throughout Sandpoint. Our proposed plan has a few more goals that go into a little bit detail. There's a goal on housing variety that addresses accessory dwelling units. There's a goal on housing affordability, talking about accessory units. And there's that same existing neighborhoods, charm and comfort protected and enhanced. And that's where it's talking about new housing types are appropriately scaled with the neighborhood in which they are developed. So these are some of the images that were shown both in the survey and at the workshop of existing ADUs. Again, from when the minutes that you received from 2008, 2017, we've had quite a few more accessory dwelling units created. That staff report gave you a breakdown, and we can certainly do that since 2017. But as you can see, the majority of the ADUs we are getting now are above garages.
We know the vacancy rate.
Sorry,
Do we know the vacancy rate of current ADUs?
I don't know what the vacancy rate is now. This was another image provided, kind of where these ADUs are placed on a lot. In the majority, in the majority of these, they are on an alley, and they are in the rear yard. And this is kind of the height of some of the current ones. The tallest one there was that kind of asymmetrical one at 30 feet in the RS single family zone, because ADUs are allowed to go as tall as the district allows. In the residential single family, that could be 35 feet. And in the multiple family, that could go to 40 feet. And I had to bring up this one because this has gotten a lot of attention. This is in the RM district. And it is 33 feet, so it could be slightly taller. And again, the main concern about this, well, it's a couple things. It's that it is so out of proportion with the principal structure, as well as the fact that it's on a corner lot. So when you say behind, it is behind the principal structure from the front yard, and it actually is slightly behind it on the side street, but it stands out a lot more because it's on a corner. So that's one that, you know, I think people has gotten people's attention on, you know, how should we be regulating accessory dwelling units? This obviously is above a very tall garage. You know, you could have a large pole barn. Do we want to, the proposed language, and again, this is a starting point, the proposed language is for accessory dwelling units to be 25% taller than the existing principal structure on the lot,
25%?
25%.
This has to exceed 25%.
That's the existing proposed.
Oh, I see. what you're saying.
Currently,
I see what you're saying.
the accessory building can go to the district limit, so that's 40 feet in this district, actually.
How large is this lot? Do you know?
How large? I don't have that. I can find out. I don't know if it was a 50-foot or 60-foot wide on Cedar. But we can get you that information.
Do we have any lot coverage restrictions?
Yes,
So,
30,
this is within a lot coverage.
oh, wait, like is it 50% coverage? Like what's the,
It's 40% for structures and 40% RM 40% and 45 impervious 40 and 40.
so. Okay, so this seems like it's more than 40% of the lot is covered by structures. No,
It's actually 40%.
I thought it was 30 permeable surface.
In the RS, it's
I'm
35%
sorry.
for structures. Yeah, again, the site plan to the right is not
to
to
scale.
scale.
Do you know the square footage on this structure? The new one?
It's
900.
the 900 square feet.
Okay.
footprint.
Footprint, 900 footprint. Because there's a bottom, which is assume it's a garage, and then the
Right.
conditioned living space is above.
Right, and it's just a single story above the living space.
So the restriction is 900 footprint.
900 square feet of the dwelling unit cannot exceed 900 square feet.
The dwelling unit.
So then
Correct.
logically, this would be 450 on the bottom and 450 above.
No,
If it's 900,
The dwelling unit can be 900 square feet.
So it could be 1800 if the bottom floor is 900 and the footprint of the second floor matches.
Right, the 900 square foot limit only is to the living space of the accessory
it.
dwelling. unit.
That's what, yeah.
It could be way more than that, because the bottom floor could be a 10-car garage, and then the dwelling unit could just be
Sure.
sitting.
900.
So,
mm,
so the 25%, what does that equate to? 25% increase in height? So if there's a single story, then you can't go a second story next to it, can you?
So if this house was 10 feet high, the accessory dwelling unit could be 12 and a half feet high.
correct.
Right,
So where did the 25% come from? What's the reasoning? Just to limit it, so there's not a two-story ADU?
it came from the not, and again, it's staff's starting point of somehow coming up with what does compatible to the existing structure mean? What does it look like? Is it 1.5 times? But before we get too much further,
You know, I'm getting like really excited here.
I want to introduce Heather Upton. She's our Arts,
Nice to meet
Culture,
you all.
Historic Preservation Officer. And as we noted, we've been talking through an incentive program. Heather works closely with the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission. And they are charged with historic preservation, community character. And so Christine and I have been talking through how do we encourage accessory dwelling units while maintaining community character. And I'm going to turn it over to
Yeah.
Heather to talk a little bit about how she views the subject of accessory dwelling units.
Thank you so much, Amy. And thank you all for letting me be a part of this discussion. I live in the world of what ifs, right? So what if we did this? Like, what would that do? And my big thing with my commission, we know with residential, with historic preservation, it's primarily going to be about education and advocacy, right? We can't deal with strong ordinances of protecting a house and not letting someone do anything with it. So keeping that in mind, we're all about working right now on creating tools to help people do rehabilitations, renovations, and infill that highlight the current historic homes styles that surround us. And we have a lot. We always laugh about this because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And every day I go to work, I drive down a different route because there's so many wonderful little bungalows that vary from 1930s into 1950s. We have great ranchers, craftsmen, styles that in today's world have so much value to them and are made from amazing materials and have such fabulous character. And with this influx of people, there's an opportunity right now where people are buying these historic homes, understanding the quality of materials and doing beautiful renovations. So we're seeing a really great transition. So the moment is really fantastic. What my commission is focusing right now on are these really wonderful pattern books that teach people about the historic styles, the history of that style here in Sandpoint, and then also kind of a step-by-step process of how to highlight that certain historical style of their house. I was with the museum previous, and so many people wanted to know about their house more. And so the want and the need is there. We believe that the resource putting it out there is really important. Now, where these educational resources come to play is they can be fantastic support for an ADU program. And so what we're trying to do is supply, help the homeowners, especially with ADU. If we want it to match the primary structure, how can we inspire them, and show them different ways from a design standpoint to do that? Number one, that's one thought. So we're going to help support them and give them the tools to complementary highlight and promote the historic primary structure they may be dealing with. And when I talk about history, I'm talking about 70s too, which is kind of hard to believe, but I think we need to kind of think ahead a little bit. Now, if we're thinking about a pre-approved program, let's not forget these fabulous little houses that are 500 square feet, maybe a little bit larger, that arrived by train in the 1900s. These Aladdin homes and these Sears and Roebuck homes, right? They were small, but they were beautiful and they were really well built. And just because you have to live in a smaller house doesn't mean that you can't be proud of it and you can't have a beautiful home. So I think we want to, my thought is, let's think a little bit broader. And yes, it's wonderful having a structure on top of a garage. It's really efficient. It's a real optimized use of space. But what if we had these fantastic little dwellings, these little cottages that can support people that, so many different people, right, in our community that need that special housing scenario. And that really these new structures that are being placed out there and that are being built are actually highlighting and promoting the fantastic historic primary dwellings that we have. So that's where I get really excited, is from an artistic standpoint, creative standpoint, and looking back at history, how can we solve some of the situations that we're dealing with today. Looking at history, we're solving housing situations with thinking about that original Aladdin home, right? Because that's what a lot of these individuals were living in. And then thinking about historic styles, which are so classic, can actually really help promote and improve all of the historic character in our residential neighborhoods. And that's where I get really elevated on. So thank you for letting me share my opinion on this.
Thank you. Would now be appropriate time for questions from the commission to our guest.
Right, well, there's kind of three, and again, this is kind of the high level, I mean, we gave you proposed language. Some areas are, pretty restrictive, the 25% over the principal structure. But three things really that we're looking for direction on to come back with more information for you, or different information, is the architectural compatibility. How detailed should the language be? What I had proposed was taking the language that's currently, the first step would be take the language that's currently in the attached ADU and have that also applied to a detached. And I can go to that language. But should it be more specific than that? Building height, should the height of the accessory structure relate to the principal structure, and what does that mean? And then parking. Should the increase of a bedroom require more than one parking space, or require that parking space is accessible year round? Again, there's two schools of thought on that requiring parking at all is just going to drive up costs and isn't necessary. And then there is neighborhood concerns that the accessory dwelling units that are being built on alleys, when the alleys aren't being maintained in the winter, all of those cars are now parking on the streets. So as with parking, always there's two schools of thought. So those are kind of the areas, and with that, yeah, I'd like to get feedback or discussion direction from the commission on the language, which while you're talking, I'll just pull up the draft language.
I have a few, if I may.
Proceed.
Okay. In reading through this, Amy, the thing that struck out to me was the if we go the 25% height, then now you've restricted ADUs to be built on top of garages. That just won't be allowed. So the concern is with the surveys, parking was an issue. Don't want them on the we don't want all those cars on the streets. So it concerns me if we do put a height restriction or not making it compatible for people to build an ADU on top of a garage. So now those people are forced to either park in the street or, in the alley, wintertime, not accessible or whatnot. So the thought from me anyway, personally, is I would like to see the garages or ADUs on top of garages for those reasons, keeps the cars off the streets, especially in the winter time or anytime. Actually, I'd rather park my car in a garage if I had one. So that is something that I'm going back and forth in my head that doesn't seem to make sense, because you have those surveys, you have those concerns with parking, but then if we eliminate that possibility of ADUs on top of garages, now we've limited even more with parking.
One thing I'd add is that the language is actually 25% greater than the principal structure, or 26 feet, whichever is less, so if you have a single story house, you are right. You would not be able to put an ADU above garage.
Right.
I like that. With the 26 foot or. Because you're giving them an option, right?
Whatever's less.
Whichever is less though, so if you.
It
have a
still
single
won't
story
allow though.
House that's maybe 15 feet tall, well, that'd be a pretty small house. It probably penalizes single story houses. Because you can, if 1.25 is less than 26 feet, that's all you can go. At least the current wording is, I'll pull it up.
Because in here it says, Slate, that if you do allow 26, it still doesn't allow for an ADU on top of a garage with the 26 feet.
26 feet would,
Oh,
based on some of the existing.
it does. Yes, I'm sorry. Yep, you're correct.
So let's see.
It's quite a grand puzzle where like, how can everybody win? You know,
The single story guy
yeah,
will feel discriminated on or upon, but 26 feet isn't as imposing as 33 feet.
If the single story guy put a cupola on top of his house, then he could.
that's right. And I like the creativity. The bell and
Well, that's what'll happen.
What he would
So
Right.
There's,
so
there's
the-
ways around all this.
The current proposal is height. The height of a detached accessory structure may be up to 25% taller than the height of the principal structure, or 26 feet, whichever is less. And then there is a height exception for corner lots, that if the accessory structure is located behind the footprint of the principal structure on all street frontages, not just the. It may be 26 feet, because corner lots are penalized in this situation because they have 2 street frontages. But yeah, back, I also wanted to just go to
we did
these building heights.
we did a lot of analyzing and they seemed way less aggressive when they were on an alley. You could barely ever notice them, but that was the problem with that one that you had shown previous. It's just right there and it's eating that little rancher. So I think that's like, we were trying to figure out what were the major pinch points for the public's reaction to that.
So here are some existing ADU heights. So there is 2-story, 26 feet above a garage. But then there's also 29. I mean, if you look at that 29 foot, that looks like a house.
Can you go to the picture of the one that's being built in the corner?
So we're also telling them they have a choice between a garage or an ADU. Which is also another limiting factor to their property value. Unless they add a second story to their existing house or some sort of feature that makes that house taller.
Right.
Which does it, I mean, has this been done in other places? Is there any kind of documentation of cause and effect, or what happens when somebody does this?
Like, is there any particular model from another city that
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
you
I mean,
like.
there's lots of other codes we can look at. I think what we wanted the commission to focus on is, we can give examples. If you look at the minutes, there's some examples from other communities on how do you address architectural compatibility. But we do think that this in particular demonstrates an issue with our current language that needs to be addressed somehow.
So I think that you said it, the architectural compatibility. right? Like for this building here, right? The primary home has a certain aesthetic appeal to it, a flatter roof line, for example. I think that architectural compatibility should have been applied to the ADU to make it harmonious, work together, right? They don't work together in this scenario. So that would be, I think that again, it leaves a little more subjectivity in the planning side of things for approval, but it also gives more flexibility to homeowners to build what kind of complements their primary structure and not necessarily limit it. I again, to like the comment of should we restrict bedroom sizes and parking sizes? My opinion is no. My opinion is more of this, that the architectural compatibility needs to be in concert with the primary structure. And I think everything else will kind of take care of itself. It's my perspective.
So I'm glad you brought up subjectivity because if we said you have to have the same roof pitch.
I think you could
That
give
would
examples.
That would have resulted in a different ADU. I mean, these people were trying to accomplish storage for campers and an accessory dwelling unit. Again, yes, it is. Again, it's the most efficient use of space to have the accessory dwelling unit on a garage. But do we want garages that are as tall as, the first floor of this is almost as tall as the house. We do have a lot of storage units going up. People can put their accessory or their toys and their
I think,
vehicles
but
to-
like on this one, if you would have matched the pitch of that roof on that ADU, it would have been a less imposing structure than what it looks like now.
Also, if it was 26 feet, it would make a lot. I mean, it's 7.5 feet, 8.5 feet, 7. Whatever it is, it's like a floor almost. Just because,
Pitch, yeah.
I mean, the look of it is that they tried to get everything they could out of the code. And so would this restrict if somebody wanted to build a detached garage? Would they be limited to the 1.25?
to the height, yes.
So you're wanting to make consistent with the RS and the RM districts for
It-
26 feet?
It would just be,
ADU specific.
accessory buildings. It could be. They'd be, either there's a height limit, or, just a flat accessory buildings can't exceed a certain number, or accessory buildings can't exceed a certain percent above the principal structure. But yeah, it would, whatever, this language would apply to all accessory
All-
buildings.
Okay, in all zones, in all districts.
Instead of having a different requirement in the residential multifamily
Mhm.
than the single family.
Would the,
Again, in the multifamily, we have the majority of the houses are single family houses.
would the pitch on this existing structure be compatible with today's code? I can look into it.
And we
I was
can
just,
get back to you.
after what Ben had said, if you match the pitch to make it blend in or more harmonious, it's a great point, especially with a structure that's so big and imposing. I don't know if today's code would allow you to build that pitch any longer.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I mean, a flatter pitch has certain composition materials that would be required. Like if you're gonna do a flatter pitch, maybe it has to be a metal roof versus a composition. There's certain things that, yeah, building code, snow load, weights and everything, but I'm sure that can be researched.
I think you can build a
Yeah,
flat
you
roof.
allow,
if you
we
want.
allow flat roofs, so
Flat with no angle.
Right.
Everything downtown.
Yeah, those are old.
And I think those pattern books would help because we can define all of the different attributes of like with signature to a rancher to kind of help guide them. But I think back to what you were saying with characteristic, we'd have to be really specific about all the elements. Because people, I don't think always organically understand like what is the contributing characteristics of a primary to what their ADU should look like. I think it's not as maybe organic to everybody, so.
I think you had it listed in there,
Yeah.
Amy, don't you?
Right now, the language is, exterior finished material must be the same or visually match the type, size, and placement of the exterior finished material of the principal dwelling unit, attached principal dwelling unit, or manufactured home. Doesn't talk about window, all it talks about is materials, really. I mean, we could bring up pitch of roof, we could bring up proportions of walls to windows. I mean, there's, back to, we can come up with different language. It's what is the comfort level of the commission in terms of what should we be regulating and to what degree? So back to currently. There is language in garages that talks about if a garage faces a street and it is a building wall greater than 12 feet in height or facade walls greater than 24 feet in length, it needs additional architectural elements. And then there's an example of what those would be, and they have to have at least 2 of them to comply.
I have a question about the parking. You brought it up that must be accessible all year. What does that mean? What would that entail? Who's responsible for that? I mean, that's, to me, opens up a huge can of worms. So it's very vague, who and what and where would and how would that be tackled is the question. Is that?
I don't have answers. We just put it in to essentially get a reaction. Because again, we got both sides on the question, the concern about ADUs is, it's great, you say you're putting in parking, but if it's not, but the same could be said for a principal residence. They could put a garage on an alley. And if the alley is not maintained in the winter, they don't use it either.
Right.
So, yeah, I just put it in there just, but I don't have the answers to all of that, but it's a way to address what, people are asking about.
Well, in a garage with an ADU above it doesn't necessarily mean that's where the tenant's gonna be parking. I think in almost all cases, the owner of the property occupies the garage, whether they store cars in it and keep their access open all winter. I don't know. And I don't even know if I'm right with that. I just know that if I was building an ADU over a garage, that I'd rent the ADU and leave the garage for myself. For purposes of storage, only working in whatever.
Well, I
So
wouldn't do that.
you wouldn't do that? I didn't build an ADU over my garage. I didn't want to wake anybody up when I was working in there. But I always thought that, that's, you have the option to build the ADU for rental space, which we all know is great for people that want to, live in town, to live in a higher density area. It's fantastic. But for me, it's kind of, the garage piece is kind of self-serving.
Well, think of how many garages attached garages are not used for storing vehicles.
Right.
The majority, well, I wouldn't say, but a lot of houses park their cars in the driveway because the garage is full of other things.
Right.
That's mine.
Mr. Chair. just-
Yep.
And there are a lot of places that don't have alleys.
Right.
So that's something we got.
That's true.
Thinking about a little bit. And then the other question I have a little bit is when you're talking about how you're going to match up and your ADU with aesthetics with the existing house, there's a lot of the older houses that you will not find any of the materials that those houses are built with anymore because they don't make it. You know, you can't get shakes. You can get shingles, but you can't get shakes. So there's a lot of houses with shakes. Try to build a house with a brick anymore, and there's a lot of houses with brick.
Yeah, you have to move to composites that have a similar appearance.
It would definitely be a lot more ask from the homeowner, you know, to go that little extra mile to be creative and invest a little bit more. But I think long-term, I just know when a lot of people come to town, they make the comment like, why are our neighborhoods so varied? They don't really make sense. And I think thinking about the long-term as we are developing and growing, this is an opportunity to try to kind of create more of a curated neighborhood concept, which I think will bring a lot more vitality to individuals down the road, instead of having these kind of just this random in height and design. And I mean, we all love everyone should have their own signature character to their living space, but I think if we can kind of curate it a little bit with this code, I think that's like what we're all trying to find, is that sweet spot where people are able to do what they would need to do. And we can have affordable housing, but how can we make it look great too? Make it make sense visually.
Mr. Chair, just going back to that house over there on Boyer, I mean, that's basically my house, almost identical. Except we don't have an alley, same style, same kind of house, metal roof. By the way, that house, when it was raining really hard, the water comes off that garage clear onto the house. So just it's going to be interesting. But what happens when the neighbor next door to you builds that house that's as big as that ADU? And you can't build on your house to build an ADU, but the neighbor next door builds a house that is that high or bigger. And I'm just, the reason I'm asking, because that's happening next to us. And, you know, they're going to go to the maximum because they want to have 5 to 6 bedrooms and they want to get as high as they can. And everybody else is single family stories all the way around. So how do you work that? And then you say you can't build on top of your garage to get your ADU. I'm just asking the question, because then all of a sudden you've got things that are so out of proportion from a great big house.
Wow.
And you're taking away the rights from the guy next door to be able to match that in a sense.
You raise a good question, which we will be coming to. Again, starting with the ADUs on the code updates is a little strange, but it's been such a hot topic. That's why we're starting here. But I think looking at the building heights in our residential district, I mean, we don't have a lot of 35-foot tall single family dwellings in any of our, we have 2 new ones that are at the max of 40. But
It shows.
Is that over on Second?
Yeah.
and, you know, if you go around town, 35 feet for a single family home is pretty tall for our community. And maybe that's a dimension that we should be looking at.
So Heather, will you be involved in the process as far as if a plan comes and, you know, oh, this,
Yes.
okay.
And my commission as well. we have some amazing minds on my commission that have backgrounds in, they're architectural historians, they're archaeologists. Many of our individuals meet the requirements for the Department of Secretary of Standards for Historic Preservation.
Mhm.
So if there was some sort of, they have me, you guys have me, of course, but you also have my commission to help if there was any sort of design review that you wanted support with or anything like that. We have a very active historic preservation.
So would all designs, would you in your commission review all designs, or is it just those that are questionable?
We don't know at this point. That would require a code change.
Okay.
So that's part of the longer term discussion of
Because our,
a standalone design
Right.
review. And is it only in designated historic districts? I mean, getting feedback, but, back to the question of how subjective can you put your code? I mean, Sarah and I get in, not arguments, but we have to go through this with many property
Right.
owners. Another housing type again, that does create housing is cottage housing. Our cottage housing requirements are very specific, but they leave enough opening that when it says you need at least 2 or 3 housing types and someone gives you how that all look the same, the only thing they did was change the siding, are those really two, so from a staff perspective, the clearer we can be, the easier it is to enforce.
because I've noticed, in our current comp plan, not the one that we just drafted. It, a lot in there, it says cohesiveness with with the neighborhood and traditional, and I mean, it's throughout that comp plan. And the time that I've lived in my neighborhood, I've noticed houses being destroyed and then industrial type houses that don't have anything to do with the character of the neighborhood. So I was just wondering where that, how did that come into play to where it doesn't coincide with the character of the neighborhood? And I can think of a few on, what's behind me. I think that's your street, Molly. St. Clair. Yeah, there was that tear down and then it just doesn't fit the 2-story that they put up. So I was just,
Where it's between what are your goals and objectives and what does your code say? So if your code isn't, and again, we've had this discussion using community character and cohesive, those kind of languages are really hard to enforce.
right.
Yeah.
We need very objective standards. Because otherwise you're just gonna get into arguments on what something means. So,
Well, I'm excited with the thought of Heather and her crew getting in there to make sure that the integrity of the neighborhood stay intact. My recommendation would be that you were with every housing design. I think that would be fantastic. To
We're
avoid
excited.
those discrepancies and those odd ones that just stick out like.
These do to try to make it easy for the community to move forward, right? Because we want this to be a very balanced concept and I think, quite a bit of creativity can come out and I think people end up really valuing the process even more. But I think on our end, it has to be clear, it has to be streamlined, solid plan. Indeed.
so I'm not gonna go away from this slide yet. Obviously we need. Well, I'm not sure the direction of the commission on the architectural compatibility
I can help.
language is.
I can help with that. I agree with previous comments about compatibility of the existing structure. which I think that could help with my next point, that I think that a single story, a single story existing structure, if the limit on the accessory dwelling was 26 feet and that's it, that can fit, that could work if the compatibility of the structure doesn't look out of place as some examples that we've seen. Because I feel like limiting, like, we're saying that you can't build something that looks good just because it's taller. And then we're also limiting the parking, which is on our list of something that we're looking at. We're also limiting the ability of people to build just a garage that could maybe be for an RV. That one's kind of a stretch, but it does fit in there. Because if you have an RV that's like a real big one, then, you know, you're gonna have to have a structure that's probably quite a bit taller than your house, especially if it looks like one that we've seen. So I think the parking, requiring parking for the accessory dwelling is gonna be really tough. And there's always on-street parking. Even if you gotta walk a block, it's probably still available at some point. I know in my neighborhood, the only time there's no parking is on Lost in the 50s or 4th of July. Otherwise, it's pretty wide open. I know it's not that way in every neighborhood, but I think adding, like, the cost of adding parking, and then also, like, we're inspecting that, and then does it turn into something else later? And we know that the best we're gonna do is before the structures are built or while they're being built. Afterwards, 10 years later, who knows, you know, it's wide open, and then it's maybe one neighbor complaining about it who's probably right. But also it's another factor of enforcing whatever our code happens to be at the time. I don't know if 26 feet is actually like what you would need to build on top of a garage. Maybe it's 25. 26 sounds good, but it sounds like the max, I think. On my last note was 1 bedroom. I think 900 square feet, 1 bedroom is kind of like living in a penthouse. It's like you have a large dwelling with 1 bedroom. And we know that people are probably building an office or 2. And like you mentioned, you know, there's original housing in Sandpoint was half that size and probably had 5 people living in it. So, over the weekend, I visited my mom, who lives in a accessory dwelling that was 540 square feet. And I felt like it was just fine for 1 person. For 2 people, you know, it would probably still be okay. But so the bedroom thing, I think, you know, if we start saying 2, then it's going to end up being 3. And then people want to have 1,200 square feet. And so I don't know if the bedroom number makes a difference as much as just the square footage, which I believe 900 square feet is plenty. So that's all.
So you're leaning the direction of just leaving square footage and not talking about bedrooms.
I think so. I mean, you guys would know better. How many of these are built where there's an obvious second bedroom without a closet? Yeah.
900 square feet is a lot of area.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
there's 3-bedroom homes that are 900 square feet.
Yeah.
3 bed, 1 bath.
Do we have a limit on bathrooms?
We don't regulate how many bathrooms they put in.
And
I don't know
are,
that we have many ADUs with more than 1 though.
how many of them are built to the 900 square feet?
We're getting quite a
More.
few.
That was my next question. What's the number?
I mean, we'll bring you the statistics for last year and this year on sizes, heights.
So when people make an application, what is their biggest complaint of what we don't allow? Or do they have complaints of what is missing, or?
It's the 2-bedroom. And again, that's what kind of brought this all to the forefront, is that we should allow 2 bedrooms, or, I mean, I don't I don't think council would object if you just didn't even regulate bedrooms. But again, I mean, one thing with ADUs is there's a benefit to them is that they don't pay full new user fees. They pay reduced fees. You start getting, is there more of an impact on the utilities for a 900 square foot ADU than a 600 square foot? Just some, it's not necessarily for the commission to discuss, but
I mean, I have a 700, I
you don't want to regulate bedrooms, you just want to regulate size.
have a 700 square foot ADU. And I have a couple that lives in there and each has their own car. So I mean, if it's a 2-bedroom, you're still dealing with the same amount of people, the same amount of cars, maybe a kid or two, but that's insignificant as far as utilities. But
So were ADUs originally were looked at like a mother-in-law type situation where it's one person or two at the most. And now since we're looking for more dwelling units, period, and probably will for quite a while, now we're looking at it as more like a family can live in an ADU or more people at least.
a young
We
family
have
at
quite a
least.
few that are rented short term. Because if you're owner occupied, your ADU can be rented short term, so. We have quite a few that are built and then immediately turned into short term rentals. But back to,
May I make a comment about height really quickly?
sure,
You guys have to, I apologize, because I can go down a rabbit hole pretty easily with creativity and historic preservation, but when I just have to make a comment. I've had a couple of public appearances and I've gotten some feedback from the community because my platform is community character preserving, what that is, right? And I've gotten some pretty upset comments about people that live in these for 40 years, these 1920s, 1930s homes and story and a halves, right? Because that's a typical bungalow concept. And there's always been the opportunity to have tall, maximized height, in their neighborhood, but there just hasn't, we're at that, great development moment, right, within the residentials with the influx of individuals coming in and investing. And so all of a sudden they're seeing these large houses and the code's always been that way, but out of nowhere spring up and all of a sudden their view is gone or they can't have a garden or, the effect is so tremendous and they're practically in tears. And so that's just something to consider when not understanding height and allowing height to come up. What eventually will happen is all of the height will spring up and the whole residential neighborhoods will be like a flower that keeps getting watered and bloom, right? For maximization of living space, right? So that's something we need to understand from a long-term standpoint, which doesn't necessarily preserve a lot of those smaller cute houses. So that's one thing to think about with height and having height restrictions is from a preservation standpoint, it's a bit more advantageous. You're also you're helping the community members and their lifestyle that they've been so used to. And I'm just saying that because you have people that have been here, generation after generation. So I just had to make that comment with height about what people are used to. And if that change is coming, so that's fine, but it's all eventually going to probably pop up that way.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please.
So I appreciate this conversation on the height and looking at that one structure, we all understand that.
Yeah.
Looks out of place. And I like the number 26. But I think that you probably have to, do an evaluation, neighborhood by neighborhood to come up with a common number that would look great. But I think you can't have a 26-foot restriction on an ADU and not have a 33 or 35 on house. It has to be the same. It makes sense. Why would you limit the height of the ADU but allow to build the house out to 35?
because it's accessory to the principal structure.
It doesn't seem logical, but
So just to the discussion, to add to the discussion, so on the building height, compatibility with the, existing principal structure. What if it were 1.5 times the principal structure, or twice the, not more than twice the principal structure, or, just, again, we started at the 25% more, but I'd like the commission to think about in terms of relation to the principal house. Should there be a proportionality with that? Or I think what the current code decided was it should be consistent with the neighborhood, and if the neighborhood is allowed to be that tall, to your point.
Mhm.
But what's happening is we aren't getting second stories added on the houses, because that's more costly than having a tall accessory building.
Right.
So it just, we could set an absolute number. We can keep it as it is, that you can build to the maximum of the district, or some happy medium in between, some relation to the existing principal structure.
So an ADU can be attached to the principal structure, and it would fall into this as well if it was above the garage.
If it were attached, it would follow the principal structure
Okay.
requirements.
So can you remind me of, say we have an application for apartment buildings or condos, and next door it's a single-story house. We require them to step up not more than 1.5 at the very first part of the structure for a certain amount of distance. I'm not thinking of a way that we could do that. But the 1.5 does fall into something else that we're already doing.
That's a great point, because if this were a multi-family dwelling, it couldn't do this. But because it's an ADU, it can.
That's a good point. That's like another reason that this shouldn't
But-
happen.
But again, we've also talked about the challenge with that language.
Yeah.
On, what is adjacent, what are we? Multi-family building by necessity needs to be generally taller than a single family structure. But, so I think height is something we are going to continue discussing. I'm getting this, well, I'd like to get a sense from the commission on the parking issue. Currently, an accessory dwelling unit requires 1 parking space. Do we leave it at that?
But they just have to prove that there's 1 space when the application is made. And then that's just,
They show it and we accept it.
My comment on that is it's like showing a room with no closet. Eventually it's gonna be turned into a bedroom. Like, how do you put it on a plan, but how do you really enforce it? Like, I think it's just something that kind of takes care of itself. I would not put any comments around parking within the code.
Just require the 1 space.
I wouldn't require it. I'm just
You say no.
nothing. There's nothing.
Don't require any for.
No
an
comment.
ADU.
There's no, nothing would be stated about parking requirements.
I'd propose. we
That's
don't.
one end of the spectrum.
I'd say we don't change the language on it
Don't change the
to
language.
account for a parking space for an ADU. If that's already baked in.
I'm looking at Coeur d'Alene's ADU and their parking. It says none required other than principal dwelling.
Oh, interesting. Huh?
does the principal dwelling require?
Yeah, what's the
Spaces?
requirement for principal? Is there any?
Doesn't say. This is just specific to ADU.
And this means off-street parking.
Correct.
I mean, you show that there's parking on the plan and then what? Like,
I think the issue is that it takes up space and it costs money. Which eventually ADUs are gonna be more expensive than a principal dwelling.
In this case, it is.
In this case, it is for sure.
I think we should have, me personally, the parking, at least one parking available. I mean, when you're thinking about
but think
where
about
you're
that.
placed
If
in
this,
the alley, you know, if you're at the end of the alley, like on my street, there's an ADU at the end, and that's easy. That person, there isn't a parking space in the alley for that car, but they can park right there on the street. I'm in the middle of my street, and I have actually 3 parking spaces that you can get 3 cars in there. So I would be remiss not to have that language in there.
I think you're driving up the cost to build an ADU. Because you're basically saying if you have to have a parking spot, then you have to go vertical with it. You have to do a 2-story unit.
I disagree.
no-
I disagree with
You
that.
could just have a surface parking
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Be covered.
Ben, if I were to paraphrase your argument, though, you're basically saying you have to account for a cost that's gonna be spurious in a lot of cases.
Mhm.
Meaning you now have to bake it into the cost of the ADU, knowing full well that it's probably not gonna get utilized.
Yeah, I mean, if I had the flexibility to build an ADU, then I didn't have to figure out the parking situation. I think that takes a variable out of the equation. Especially if it's close in core downtown, maybe somebody doesn't have a car. Maybe they ride their bike or they walk to work.
Well, that would be nice.
That's a way to maybe enable that behavior.
So does the parking spot, like in this instance, the primary unit doesn't need to have parking spots, right?
The primary unit has to have 1 and the ADU has to have 1. They could both be in the driveway for the principal structure. It doesn't have to be, doesn't say it has to be next to the ADU. It just says you have to
Somewhere.
provide enough space for an off-street parking.
Well, if
space.
this is a 2-car garage, that is 2 parking spots, correct? Whether or not they use it for,
Two in this one.
but, you know,
Yeah.
they're providing 2 parking spaces, whether or not they use it for parking cars is one thing, but would that take care of that requirement?
So if you look at these site plans. You know, some of them are set so that you could park a car in front of the ADU, some you can park the car next to the ADU. They don't necessarily have, they're not necessarily ADUs on top of garages.
There's no size for a parking spot, is there? I mean, it could be like just big enough for a car, or is there like
You are
Standard.
supposed to have a buffer.
What are the dimensions of that parking spot?
A typical parking spot is probably 8 by 19. 9 by 19 perpendicular.
Is that in the code for this parking spot for ADUs? Does it have the dimensions in there, the size? Sarah?
Yeah, we have the typical dimension of a parking stall is 9 by 19.
There's one thing to keep in mind though, too, because we now have half our parking on the streets cut out during the winter months. So if we're gonna add more.
That
cars
might
to
take a
this-
while to catch on.
Yeah, that might be self-correcting in the long term. I don't know. I hear you, and anybody who
Yeah.
drives around South Sandpoint in, January 15th. Suddenly, like, it, and suddenly all those ADUs are just pushed out onto
Yeah.
the street, but. I would also argue it's been pretty manageable, just, and I know that we're all throwing out a lot of anecdotes, but, just from my perspective, but I hear what you're saying.
I just know what it's like around our neighborhood for parking and
So they're all different.
get them off the street as best you can because
Yeah.
we've got a neighbor that's got 2-car garage and room for 4 cars, and they still have 2 or 3 trucks on the road,
Yeah.
on the,
Yeah.
out on the road with their trailers and things, yeah.
Yeah.
Because most people don't use it anyway.
Mhm.
Since you brought that up, that's another thing that's on my mind, and it has nothing to do with this, so I digress, and I apologize. Is there something, there's these trailers and these boats parked on the street all season long. Is that allowed?
No.
I actually have a very specific story.
Going on
about
that.
that.
Point of order.
Yeah.
So.
Wanted to know.
Yeah.
Topic, I'm hearing it's somewhere between don't require it for the ADU or
Leave it alone.
one for the ADU.
Mhm.
But not a discussion, no requirement that it be maintained.
I would agree with that
Sounds good.
assessment.
The one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's one I want to come back to though, if we could.
Go ahead.
sure.
And I don't know how we do this. And, it's interesting that we talk about all this and it's hard to like remove your personal
Right, can you
biases.
put your microphone?
But it's hard to
down?
remove your personal biases around these things when you talk around street parking, things like that. But when it comes to like the character of what is Sandpoint, like I'm pretty biased, right? Used to live down on the old nurses' quarters down on
Right.
First Avenue. And now live in the McGovern House, and I hope it's always known as the McGovern House. And so I'm pretty biased about that. And so I would propose that, and I don't know how we do this, but we spend some time constructing some language around preserving the architectural character. And I'd propose that we bake into that and come up with some language specific around height,
Mhm.
around the architectural character language. I don't know how we get there, but I think we can probably take a couple runs at it.
Yes.
So that's my 2 cents. In terms of the parking, I don't know, I could get talked into sort of either way, but I think the architectural character and the height is, we all look at that one, you're like, you own a ranch home and you built this monster behind, like, what are you doing? Come on. And it's just so atonal, right? But how do you bake that into the language? And I would propose that we spend some time trying.
Yes,
Appreciate that.
yes.
And I'm a new resource to you all. I just
Okay.
started on June 6th. And so I've come in after this whole discussion started. So that's something to think about. And, thinking about community character and history and carriage houses. That wasn't the highlight of the house, right? That was always set back.
Mhm.
That was utilitarian.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about ADU and houses, what are you highlighting?
Yeah.
Are you highlighting the accessory dwelling unit? Are you highlighting the beautiful home? And the home has a soul. And the houses are created with certain attributes that teach you how to approach it and make you feel welcome. So let's all remember that when we're thinking about homes and history and entrances and presence. What are we highlighting? And it is important to be functional in today's world, right? We don't all eat off of fine china and sterling anymore because it doesn't go in the dishwasher. But also, how do we again go back to preserving the historic preservation, preserving the community character as we're moving forward? How do we bring that? And I love that you mentioned that. So I just wanted to point that out as something to think about because
The challenge is
yeah.
gonna be, in the actual language, right? These ideals, we can all, like, we know the look and feel, but getting it into language, I think is we're gonna have to take some runs at it.
I appreciate that. And I'm excited to bring on any expertise in my commission to help support you guys too with this endeavor and to help kind of wrap our minds around it furthermore. We meet on a weekly basis just to workshop and come up with historic preservation resources and plans.
So I think that's the problem that I've seen with newer builds, that marriage, actually it's more like a divorce, they just don't
Yeah.
coincide together because you're trying to, bring the modern, new building and you have this 1920 house that the two just don't mix. So it's disheartening to see that it's gone to that point to where that marriage is not there anymore. Their kids are, they're divorcing now and it's just ugly. It's just not attractive.
It's not complimentary.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
So I would offer that this Coeur d'Alene code for ADUs is, I think, it's very simple. It's, I agree with some of the things, some of them I don't, but it says additions to an existing structure or newly constructed detached structures created for the purpose of developing an accessory dwelling unit shall be designed consistent with the existing roof pitch, siding, and windows of the principal dwelling unit. I think that's
Feels like it.
Pretty straight.
Plagiarized.
straightforward.
All right.
No, it's a good model.
Yeah.
I think,
Well,
you
it's
know,
also,
in Coeur d'Alene, you have that whole downtown historic district or, what could be
Right.
in their old architecture. It's pretty amazing. And then you get to the outside of it and then you've got, sprawly and weird.
I'd probably add, I like that, but the type of roof too. I mean, just a normal shed roof or a full hip or like the one we keep looking at. If the ADU had that same full hip roof with the same pitch, same composition roof or whatever it is, and be a lot shorter, which that roof pitch design would
shorten it.
also shorten it by, probably 6-7 feet or 8 or whatever. That might be the difference. And also that ADU does not have, there's no eaves. And then the main unit has like a 4-foot eave or a 3-foot. It's a pretty large eave. So I still think 33 feet in comparison to the single structure is, the single story is, there's such a drastic difference that you could try really hard and you're not going to get it to look the same, but those things would help. And maybe 1.5 height or whatever. I'm kind of stuck on the 1.25. And I keep thinking about a house that has like that really low pitch roof. Normal houses have, at least a 6-12 up to a 12-12, especially if they have like a 1.5 story. That means the ADU could probably be 2 stories if they really wanted to squeeze it in there, and they could have a garage that was like 8 feet high and it would probably fit. So we might, in my mind, maybe I'm just looking at like a couple of places around town that are going to be not able to do a 2-story ADU. But there may be way more than that, because there is a lot of single family that are in those higher density areas now. And those are the ones we're probably talking about. Those are the ones that are going to end up being the most appealing to add to or to expand. So this will be like everything we talk about there'll be way more people coming in with way more ideas and how to get around it and why we made the mistakes we made and
Well, and really, back to this one. One of the main reasons it's 600 is it's on a street. If this were mid-block on this block, you probably wouldn't get, not as many people would be aware of it, because if you look at this one, I guess you can't, lower right, that's a very tall ADU, but it's behind a tall house and it's kind of in the middle of an alley. So until you are in that alley, you don't know what's there. So we may need to work on language if you're on a corner lot. I mean, we did do that exception, but I think corners are more challenging, corner lots.
This scenario on the bottom right, that occurs at Walnut and Division, so there is a corner there.
What's that?
This one on the bottom right, that's picture,
Yeah.
that is on there's a series of
The
them.
green one,
No, the bottom right white,
bottom.
Division and Walnut. That's Division and Walnut.
That's actually on Pine. The house front's Pine,
Okay, I know on Division and Walnut,
okay?
there's a series of homes
Oh, yeah,
there
right, exactly.
that are smaller cottage style, and then it has a 2-story ADU behind it.
And it is a corner lot.
Is a corner lot.
Yeah, that one is a corner lot.
Yeah, all of them are the same. They've got the single story homes and.
Right, with a two-story.
So
And it'd be interesting to see how much taller those ADUs are than the principal structures,
Mhm.
like what percent taller it is.
Mhm.
on the top left, we consider that a 1.5.
Yeah,
And I love
So-
all the detail on that one too. I just have to comment on that.
So if that was sitting next to a single story, that wouldn't be allowed with the 1.25.
well, that's sitting next to a house that looks very similar to it. I just don't. have a picture of the house.
It would-
Of all the ADUs has probably done the best.
Does look good.
Taking the detail of the.
Yeah, that was a tear down. They tore down the
Yeah.
house.
And they married the two with
Mhm.
like the unique.
With some type
They
of,
would.
Right,
Yeah.
so I think those details really kind of made that frosting was a winning component to the two.
Like the second one, I see more and more of this style.
Yeah.
To the right of it. And this is what aggravates me when I see these in neighborhoods, these homes, these ADUs, because that is nowhere in any of the original neighborhoods. And does not match any of the character of Sandpoint. So it's those industrial type looking ones that just make you cringe.
Speak for yourself.
Almost the hour.
So we're not,
Virginia Metal.
Division.
Available.
I think I'm more comfortable saying that my opinion is 1.5 is
And they match up fairly well.
is cool for the single story.
Hmm.
Because it allows that, and I think, I mean, maybe we all agree on that people should be allowed to do that. I don't think it looks, you can put that next.
No,
to
it's
it.
not intrusive.
Yeah,
That's a typical bungalow style too, a 1.5.
and
How you're going back to history on that.
so what's the height of that? That's gotta be close to 20 feet.
it's more than that. If you got 8 foot, so 7 foot doors, you got 8 foot garage doors. So 8, 7, 4, 15, it's gotta be 22, 20.
So it's less than 26. So I mean, the 26 is
Not that much.
in that area is,
Yeah, it probably is around 26. It's between 20. 26.
I think your 26 covers it.
These, I think on this one, I think these 26, these are the ones on Walnut,
Hmm,
this 26 foot.
It would match up to.
I feel taller.
they're real narrow though, so the roof pitch
Those are
doesn't get
the
high.
25 foot lots.
All right.
All right, well.
Any more questions for staff at this time?
You know, I'd just like to make one comment on the parking. I don't have an issue with the requirement for one. And I think usually what will happen when you're working on your property, maybe you're building a new garage with an ADU and you're conscious of your 30% requirement for permeable surface. Because you have to take into account, this means any sidewalk, patio, coverage, all of it, you have to do math to make sure that you're right. And then you, like I did, I checked it off with the city to make sure it was fine. But it limited the size of my garage to 24 by 24, so I could meet the formula and criteria for 30% permeable. So I essentially have a garage that's built 5 feet off the property line on the side and 1 foot off the back. Because it matched what the code was for existing garages. But that left me 2 full parking spots on the other side of the property, as long as it's gravel. And you know, it just happened to work out. Maybe I could have got a couple more feet out of my garage and still park 2 cars back there without you know, straddling the property line with my neighbor. So I think that, you know, if you're conscious of what you're doing on an ADU that's built on the back, these problems, they kind of work themselves out if you follow the formula. Now, I don't know that a 150 by 50 lot is the most common in Sandpoint, and my house is not large by, you know, any measure really. And when you compare it to, you know, houses that we see around here, I think I'm at 1,600 square feet, but I also like a little bit of yard too. So, maybe, you know, I don't know that the formulas are wrong, but with the, like Mo said, you know, and other comments that, you know, some of these ADUs, like this one at 900 square feet per level just seems big, you know, for that kind of a space. You said the same thing about there was, you know, the industrial looking buildings that have reached max height, don't fit the neighborhood. I don't know that there's any help outside of, you know, personal evaluation of what you're trying to do to meet the requirements of the city. It seems like in meeting that formula, it provides you enough of what you need without being excessive. I kind of look at that thing on Blair, it's like pretty excessive. But he fit the code. He showed his plans and nobody said you couldn't do it.
Right.
Even after they saw the plans, like, no, that doesn't work.
They wanted to.
It went back and forth a few times, but
I wasn't here yet, for the record. I'm just kidding.
If you would have been here, it would have been a Sears house that you bought after World War II out of a catalog.
Or World War II, and that'd be super cool.
Amy, are we going to, so that AARP, that you included in our packet was fantastic. I enjoyed reading that and learned a lot, actually. I have a bunch of questions about that too. Is that going to be for a different meeting? Discussing the incentives that you had brought up back in May
yeah.
in those type of programs and then the site plans that you had also just discussed about having, you know, to cut the costs for owners to build ADUs that they could choose
Right.
plans.
Yeah, the incentive program that Christine is working on, that will be coming, you know, we'll be coming forward with information on that when it is developed. Again, the goal of that will be to incentivize the smaller units. Just because the cost to build them is that much less that it would actually create affordable housing, whereas the cost to create these 2-story ADUs is, you know, we know those are going, and the ones on Walnut, I think, are going for 1,800 for the ADUs a month.
Jeez. Not affordable housing.
So, yeah, and I wasn't planning on necessarily going over the AARP publication, but we certainly can discuss it. I mean, I think a lot of that it brings up, I mean, again, I think we have a very favorable, I think our code right now is very favorable to ADUs, and I don't think we're not trying to not encourage ADUs by changes. We're just trying to address concerns that are coming forward to the community. But I think our code is pretty liberal, and I think we're doing a lot of things right in terms of just based on the number of ADU permits we are getting. I think we're doing a lot of the things in that publication that they're recommending that communities do. And that goes back to, you know, again, this is the 3rd, 4th time ADUs have been discussed. So, but again, in 2017, we were at a different place than than we are today. And we've seen, you know, what the current code results in, and are there tweaks that are needed.
So, Mr. Chair, for consideration, I think we probably heard maybe 2 good ones tonight, which was, you know, Ben, the language you picked up from Coeur d'Alene of that, keeping with the principal structure, the same roof pitch, siding trim, personality. And then for single story, not to exceed 1.5 for the ADU. I mean, that feels like a pretty good starting point in terms of edits that I would consider.
I think the compatibility, I
Yeah.
think we all,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a big piece.
and I guess that's up to you to figure out what's the best use, what's the best way to describe that, or the parameters that are most important for that to be meaningful.
Mhm.
Any more questions for staff?
Uh-oh. He's
I
thinking,
just was running some numbers out of curiosity. That
wheels are turning. He's
if
like,
you have a 2,000 square foot house. And we're talking about ADU mass. Then do you look at a formula, it's like 25% of your ADU can be 25% of the square footage of your house.
No, because we do allow people to say, actually, maybe their house is currently smaller than the 900 square feet, so they actually want to call that ADU the print, we do allow some flexibility on allowing at least one of the dwellings to be that maximum number.
You'd probably bet that ADU and that diagram that you have there is bigger than the house.
Square footage wise?
Yeah,
I don't know, and again, the site plan I gave you wasn't a good reference, but the house is pretty long.
Ranchers tend to,
Well,
they're sneaky.
But it could be,
they might make a change on the primary dwelling.
right,
That's all I had.
I'm gonna guess that house is probably in the neighborhood of about 1,200 square feet.
Think so?
It looks so similar to what our house is. that,
Hmm.
And that seemed to be kind of consistent with a lot of homes built.
So
in
the
that era.
ADU is 600 square feet bigger. Possibly. Because it's 900 aside, right? It doesn't seem like it should work.
2 houses on 1 lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. This is a great conversation.
All right, I'm gonna cap it off right there.
Just one real quick. The one that you're showing though, does that 900 square feet include that huge deck that they have on it and the loft?
It would because it's,
we'll look at the plans. And
Okay, I just kind of
Yeah,
curious.
curious.
That's a
Yeah.
huge deck out on the front of that.
Can we have a meeting on that specific? Can we,
Yeah.
can we want to appeal.
Can we turn it down?
nothing's coming down.
I think you might have opened up yeah, where's Fonda? We need Fonda.
Yeah, we need a lawyer now.
There she is.
Yes, I'm right here. I've been listening to all of your commentary.
That's really sneaky.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm pulling double duty. I'm watching a baseball game because my son's playing baseball in Chihuahua. I'm listening to you.
Oh.
Good job.
So, no, I think all of your discussion has been very, very good tonight. I think you're being very thoughtful about this. I know I've been listening to her trying to pull out of you like, okay, but point me in a direction. But I think that your thoughtfulness and your approach to this is a very healthy discussion. And yes, if we need another meeting, not just on any particular structure in town, but another meeting on this conversation, we can talk about this as long as we need to get it right. I will say, Ben, yes, the Coeur d'Alene code is very simple. They are in the process of revising that code, and it is a very hot topic down here right now. It has drawn a lot of public commentary, so.
Around what
With-
specifically?
With that, Fonda, is the simplicity, has that caused more problems?
Yes, the simplicity causes subjectivity on the part and then difficulty with enforcement. Or people saying, well, you treated me differently than you treated somebody down the road.
Gotcha. So that's good to know because we need to be cognizant of being too simple and then opening more can of worms for staff and more headaches and more arguments.
Well,
that's
and I
not what we
think
want.
your commentary was well taken on the parking issue and the enforceability. And even though Amy right now is just trying to get some direction from you so that we can attack this entire code at once and not piecemeal it. We always have to look at the enforceability side. So it can become problematic.
Right.
So yeah, it would be great at some point to have a meeting where we could discuss this topic again and maybe focus on maybe the range of ADUs that have been applied for and built in the city and since its inception, which isn't that long ago. As far as I know, ADUs are 15 years old, maybe.
I didn't even think that long. And I will tell you, I have had other cities down south attorneys who have contacted me because our code is other than these tweaks we need to make because of how it's maybe turning out within the community, that love our code and have adopted it almost word for word in other jurisdictions.
Interesting.
Okay, well, when they call you, tell them we're working on this other stuff.
Yeah.
I do tell them.
Wait for even the new and improved.
They can
Yes.
participate on Zoom.
We're just gonna do code for Idaho. Sandpoint P and Z does Idaho.
We're getting out of order.
That's like a Netflix series.
Well, I'd love to move on to our public comment period now. I'm gonna enforce that. Because we could go on for a long time. And I think if we table that further discussion into a more direct meeting, I think that would be really good. I think everybody here would love to. Yeah.
I think it's very important, this section, ADU section.
But we have to fit it in like pretty soon. Or
Well,
add
we
it.
will, again, you are gonna be having some public hearings, on some, let's see, you have the upcoming rezone. You have a couple of subdivisions that will be coming through. You'll have a flagpole lot coming through. So there will be, from here on out, there probably will be action, but hoping that we get you will have your hearing on July 18th for the comprehensive plan and hoping that that goes to council August, early September at the very latest, then that is off our plate and we will really be talking about code then.
So Amy, with this ADU, I know we had the survey about the ADUs. Will this go to public workshop? Will there be another opportunity for the community to weigh in?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just, and again, the survey wasn't unique to ADUs. That was one of the subjects, but, you know, there are certain parts of, you know, there's the ADUs, there's cottage housing, which we have one cottage housing development approved. We have another one that's in the process, almost being approved. But it's a very cumbersome code, the way it is written. So that is one that we're gonna definitely look at. But again, we need to look comprehensively. Again, is it, you know, I think heights in our neighborhood is something we really need to look at.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna move on to the public comment portion of our meeting. This time allows the public to address the commission on items not on the agenda. If anyone here in chambers wishes to speak, you must complete a public comment form available on the table by the door and hand it in to city staff. If you're on Zoom and you wish to speak, please raise your hand on Zoom at this time. Madam Clerk, are you aware of anyone who wishes to speak?
There's one individual in the room. There is no one on Zoom.
Okay, I'll ask for your attention, please, as I recite the rules and procedures for public comment during the meeting. The commission may not hear or take testimony at this time on any planning and zoning matter that is before the city or is known to be likely or is known to be a likely application. Such testimony is not allowed only during a properly noticed public hearing. Is allowed only. Sorry. I should bring my glasses. Issues regarding.
They're just readers.
Wow. Issues regarding the performance of city employees constitute matters that must be discussed only in an executive session and are not appropriate during the public portion of any meeting. Matters that have been previously heard and decided by the commission or by city council may be determined to be inappropriate for the general public comment period. Citizens may use this time to request that items be placed on a future agenda for further discussion. Those in attendance are not to disrupt this meeting or the business at hand that is being taken up by the commission. Disruptive behavior includes clapping, disruptive noise, and comments or exclamations from the audience. Comments shall not be personally derogatory, nor shall they be personally directed at any individual, organization, or business. Public comment opportunities during meetings are for comments only. Do not direct your questions to the commission or staff. And do not approach the dais. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes. When it is your turn to speak, please state your name and whether you reside inside Sandpoint city limits. Madam Clerk?
Our individual in the room is Molly O'Reilly.
But I'm on an agenda item, and this is only for non-agenda items. He said.
That's correct. That's what I said. Fonda?
There she is.
Yeah, I'm here. I can only see on my screen the big 3 minutes, so. Yes, the public comment is for non-agenda items, and so that's how the chair's script is written. Because this is not a public hearing.
Commission used to take public comment on agenda items.
I'm trying to listen. Sorry, I cannot hear her.
She had said that this commission used to take comments on agenda items.
Which agenda item are you wishing to speak on?
The most recent one, 6B.
So, on the ADU discussion?
Yes.
So at the time that the code is considered for by the commission, there will be a public hearing on this at that time, and you will have the ability to speak at that point.
I came here and I sat for over 2 hours because I really care about this issue, and I have some thoughts that I think might be constructive and that I think might be better before a public hearing because they might affect what comes to a public hearing.
Would you be willing to submit those in writing to our city planner, Amy Tweeten? And she can incorporate that in the next conversation?
You know, yes, hurting a computer physically hurts my eyes. So you are asking me to go through some pain after I sit here for 2 hours, having turned in a form that says I want to speak and on what, and not being told I was unable to speak. This doesn't seem very fair.
Would it be a little easier for you to do an audio recording for Amy and send that to her that way? Rather than the staring at a computer and typing?
Fonda, would it be inappropriate that Miss O'Reilly could meet with Amy sometime and document her notes, or was that?
That would be perfectly acceptable. And Mr. Chairman, it is your choice. If you wish to allow 3 minutes of public comment, you certainly can do that, just recognizing what was already stated in the preamble.
Just need a motion.
Would we need to move for that, or could I just?
You as the facilitator of the meeting can make that decision.
Well, I'm inclined to allow you 3 minutes, mostly because we don't get a lot of attendance here.
Well, if you don't allow comments, you're not going to get more people here.
We're very
Thank you.
excited, but only one request, you have to bring 2 more people next time you come.
I can bring my dog for sure.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fonda.
Okay,
You're welcome.
Molly O'Reilly, I live in the city. Let me talk I know the goal is affordability with ADUs. And I think with parking, you have a lot of options that are helpful. You could not require any parking on a one-story ADU. How many of these people are building garages underneath because you require parking? That could help with height if you incentivize a single-story ADU. And it also occurred to me you could base parking on whether the street would accommodate it. Most of our streets are 40 feet wide. Parking acts as traffic calming. It's really good in neighborhoods to have cars on the street. But Hickory, for example, doesn't have room. So maybe the configuration of the street matters a bit. If you are going to talk about clearing snow in the alley, I encourage you to distinguish between short-term rental ADUs and long-term rental ADUs, because it will make it less affordable. My ADU will rent for $750 a month. It's 240 square feet. I'll invite you to see it before my retail clerk tenant moves in, hopefully in a month or so. The setback, the proposal that you move the whole building if it doesn't meet setback, that great slide of the existing ADUs, the top left one is configured in a way over a garage that it actually has some setback. And you could just require that the ADU be set back from without moving the garage underneath it. Be careful of roofs. The first ADU that was built after they were made legal in the city is at the corner, the northwest corner of Euclid and Erie. It's a mansard roof. They begged to not have to put a mansard roof on this, saying, this is going to make it so much bigger. So go look at that ADU, make sure that you're not requiring ADUs to have more presence than you want. Same, you know, there's kind of a Swiss chalet ADU between Euclid and St. Clair on Michigan, next to a dilapidated rental cottage, which will probably be a tear down, be my guess. So I don't know. Those are really all the things I wanted to say, but think really constructively about parking. An off-street parking spot costs about $20,000. If you're requiring an alley to be snow removed, which is really what it takes to be cleared,
Mr. Chairman, that is 3 minutes.
that's a lot. But have fun. I think you can do some things with that.
Thank you. Well, now we can move on to the time where commissioners, if you have any additional questions for staff or topics of future discussion, now would be the appropriate time, which we've kind of covered.
I think I've got it all out.
We got it.
And it feels like our dance card's full here for.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking too, is we have a lot coming up and then we've added some stuff. I think if we just stay the course, we're gonna be in good shape. So unless there's something pressing.
I mean, if you're not doing anything on the 4th of July, you can add it in.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think I'm out of town. Okay, I'm gonna adjourn at 7:37. 7:30.
33.
33. I'm not good with
Well, you need
numbers
those
tonight.
glasses again.
Yeah.